Good morning. This is Amir 5858. I am Amir. I am thankful to all international news sources and my team. Following are the news which have been reported by American, European, Canadian, Asian, African, Australian channels and AP, AFP and Reuters news agencies. Now the news headlines. Dangerous heat wave scorching Midwest of America. Russian agreement with North Korea. Russian president in Vietnam. American broken promises to formerly enslaved people. Tropical storm Alberto. Boeing company sued. South African president took office. American soldiers sentenced in Russia. Power blackout in Ecuador. Stonehenge monument defaced in London by orange color. Ban on Mexican avocado. Louisiana and 10 Commandments. Baseball legend Willie Mays. Canada and Iranian Revolutionary Guards. Canada's WestJet strike. Israeli tanks in Rafah. Differences between Israeli military and government. Israeli military says Hamas cannot be destroyed. Now the watch news channels.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Nawaz. On the NewsHour tonight, millions face record-breaking temperatures as a dangerous heat wave scorches the Midwest and East Coast.
Russian President Vladimir Putin signs a mutual defense agreement with North Korea's Kim Jong-un, which could increase weapon supplies for Russia's war in Ukraine.
And on Juneteenth, an investigation uncovers new details about America's broken promise to formerly enslaved people after the Civil War.
It wasn't just a promise that was spoken and then broken. They lived there for like up to a year and a half before they were kicked off.
Like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. Tens of millions of Americans are baking in a dangerous early summer heat wave. Dozens of cities from the Midwest to New England are expected to reach record highs as the heat index hits triple digits. The powerful heat dome is forecast to keep temperatures well above normal across much of the country through the weekend. In the meantime, wildfires are raging across the West, fueled by soaring temperatures and dry conditions. In New Mexico, 2 massive blazes forced thousands of evacuations and killed at least one person. And a major fire north of Los Angeles remained less than 40% contained.
Across the globe, authorities say hundreds died in Saudi Arabia, where temperatures reached 125 degrees at the Grand Mosque in Mecca this week. More than 1 million people traveled to the country this week for the Hajj, the annual Islamic pilgrimage. In Greece, a stifling heat wave was responsible for the deaths of multiple tourists, including a 55-year-old man from Floral Park, New York. For more on the impact and implications of all this, we're joined by journalist Jeff Goodell. He's author of
I'm Stephanie Tsai with NewsHour West. Here are the latest headlines. The first named tropical storm of the Atlantic hurricane season is brewing in the Gulf of Mexico. Alberto formed this morning some 300 miles southeast of Brownsville, Texas, with sustained winds of 40 miles per hour. Tropical storm warnings were in effect today along much of the state's southern shoreline. It's due to make landfall in northern Mexico on Thursday, an area that's already seen rough waves and heavy rains. Today, Texas Governor Greg Abbott issued a disaster declaration for 51 counties in preparation of the storm. Relatives of the victims of 2 Boeing 737 MAX crashes have asked the Justice Department to fine the company more than $24 billion. In a letter to the DOJ, a lawyer for 15 families wrote that the request is legally justified because, quote, Boeing's crime is the deadliest corporate crime in U.S. history. The letter comes a day after Boeing's outgoing CEO, Dave Calhoun, apologized to families in a dramatic moment in Senate testimony. 346 people were killed in 2 Boeing crashes in 2018 and 2019. Cyril Ramaphosa has promised a new era for South Africa as he was sworn in for a second full term as president today. Ramaphosa's re-election comes after his African National Congress Party lost its 30-year majority in last month's vote. The ANC struck a deal with the opposition Democratic Alliance to form a coalition government. Today, a military parade marched through the capital before Ramaphosa addressed the nation, saying voters want to see unity from their leaders.
The people of South Africa have stressed that they are impatient with political bickering. Today, I stand before you as your humble servant to say that we have heard you.
Ramaphosa went on to say that South Africa remains, quote, deeply unequal and highly polarized. A Russian court has sentenced an American soldier to nearly 4 years in prison for stealing and making threats of murder. Officers brought Staff Sergeant Gordon Black to the court in Vladivostok in eastern Russia today. Authorities say he was arrested during an unauthorized trip to the country to see his girlfriend, who accused Black of stealing money from her wallet. The sentence comes as the U.S. continues to work on the release of other Americans held in Russian jails. They include former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan and Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich. A nationwide blackout struck Ecuador today, leaving most of the country's 18 million people without power. The public works minister blamed a transmission line failure that led to a cascade of disconnections. Meanwhile, the country is also reeling from a weekend landslide that killed at least 17 people and left 19 others injured. The incident occurred after heavy rains hit the central region of the country. British authorities arrested 2 climate activists today for defacing the Stonehenge monument. Video captured the protesters spraying the megaliths with orange paint as an onlooker tried to stop them. They're members of the environmental activist group Just Stop Oil, which said on social media that the paint is made of cornstarch and will dissolve in the rain. The incident comes a day before thousands will gather at the 4,500-year-old monument to celebrate the summer solstice. Mexico's president asked his foreign minister today to work with the U.S. ambassador to resume inspections of avocados. The U.S. suspended inspections in the state of Michoacan after 2 agricultural department employees were assaulted and temporarily held by assailants. Michoacan is Mexico's biggest exporter of avocados. Farmers there say they're worried about their jobs if the suspension continues.
We
are losing a lot with the USDA suspension. We can't export even a single avocado. The government should do its job and guarantee the safety of the inspectors so they can do their job. We want to work, but we can't do it without them.
The current halt on inspections won't entirely block shipments of Mexican avocados to the U.S. Many Michoacan avocados are already in transit, and the state of Jalisco also exports them. Louisiana has become the first state to require that the 10 Commandments be displayed in all public school classrooms. That includes kindergartens all the way through state-funded universities. The law mandates a poster-sized display of the commandments be clearly visible, and it must include a context statement describing how they were a prominent part of American public education for almost 3 centuries. The displays must be in place by the start of 2025. Critics question the constitutionality of the measure and say lawsuits can be expected. And Americans have been honoring the Juneteenth federal holiday, marking the moment in 1865 when word reached the enslaved people of Galveston, Texas, that they were freed by the Emancipation Proclamation. That was 2.5 years after President Lincoln issued the decree. The city of Dallas commemorated the event with a 2.5-mile walk for freedom. The annual march was led by 97-year-old Opal Lee, who is widely known as the grandmother of Juneteenth.
I'm delighted, I really am, that so many of you are celebrating freedom. And I don't mean freedom in Texas or freedom for black people. I mean freedom for all of us.
Lee was instrumental in making Juneteenth a nationally recognized holiday in 2021. Still to come on the News Hour, a look at the latest round of primary election results from Virginia, Georgia, and Oklahoma. Dr. Anthony Fauci discusses death threats and his legacy in the second part of our interview on his new memoir. And baseball mourns the passing of one of its all-time greats, Willie Mays.
This is the Peopleism at Arizona State University.
Russia and North Korea have taken a step toward improving relations as President Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un signed a strategic partnership agreement today. Both sides pledged to help each other's defense and security and to fight off sanctions. Stephanie Tsai has the story. All right, before we go, we have heard from some of you that your DVR recordings of the NewsHour have mysteriously stopped.
Good evening.
We have ever so slightly renamed the program PBS NewsHour with a space between news and hour as part of our recent rebranding on air and online. This change is throwing off some scheduled DVR recordings, so please do reset. We apologize for the inconvenience, and thank you for your online feedback.
I encountered that problem myself. Join us again here tomorrow night for new book recommendations to add to your summer reading list this year. And that is the NewsHour. For tonight, I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Navaz. On behalf of the entire NewsHour team, thank you for joining us.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has
On this Wednesday night, Canada takes aim at Iran's elite military force. Why Iran's Revolutionary Guard has been declared a terrorist entity.
Our government will ensure that there is no immunity for Iran's unlawful actions.
Plus a message for Canadians living in Iran.
It's time to come back home.
Stifling heat, the scramble to keep cool as scorching and deadly temperatures affect millions in the U.S., the Middle East, and here at home. Turbulence at WestJet, canceled flights, and a looming strike. Are your summer travel plans in jeopardy? And remembering a supreme talent of baseball. Tributes to Willie Mays, whose power, speed, and skill dominated the game in every way.
Tonight, the first named storm of the year bearing down on the U.S. as tens of millions swelter under extreme heat. Tropical storm Alberto forming in the Gulf of Mexico, bringing heavy rain, high winds, and coastal flooding to Texas. First responders rescuing people by boat. And it comes as that relentless heat wave stretches from Michigan to Maine, while in New Mexico, raging wildfires turn deadly. Also tonight, Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un signing a historic pact, vowing Russia and North Korea will defend each other if they're attacked. How it could impact the war in Ukraine and raise nuclear threats. Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu clashing with the White House. The war of words after the Prime Minister accused the U.S. of withholding weapons for months. The multi-state manhunt for a triple homicide suspect considered armed and dangerous. The new law, the first state to require the 10 Commandments displayed in all public school classrooms. Our series, Justice for All, jails accused of banning in-person visits for profit. And the moment during our interview when one sheriff admits he was wrong. Remembering one of the best to ever play the game, the legendary Willie Mays, and the historic flight, black veterans traveling to the nation's capital in honor of Juneteenth. This is NBC Night.
An RCMP officer who faces multiple criminal charges is back on duty. Kevin Biagioni is awaiting trial on charges related a suspect, and he is awaiting trial on charges related to shooting a suspect and was later disciplined for an alleged road rage incident. CTV News has learned not only is he back on the job, but he's also been promoted. Ben Nesbitt has the story.
After repeated inquiries from CTV News over the course of a week, the RCMP finally confirmed that Kevin Biagioni is back on active duty.
I have never seen anything that is disturbing as this.
Biagioni is is facing charges of aggravated assault, careless use of a firearm, and discharging a firearm.
Now, is it me or is the Biden Rescue Coalition running out of ideas?
You thought that you, as an outspoken critic, could be a target yourself. Some people think that sounds overdramatic, but I'm right there with you. I think that he is so vindictive that he will go after, however he has to, through the IRS maybe, or even, through sponsors to get us off the air.
And I think it's bad to have somebody saying, give me as much power as you can in this country so I can use it to go after other Americans. I don't think anybody's safe.
Oh my goodness, no one's safe. Well, that's very dramatic. It's deranged, and as usual, they're projecting again. Because silencing and punishing critics is exactly what the left is trying to do. Well, it turns out George Soros is asking the FCC to fast-track his nationwide radio network takeover. According to the New York Post, foreign company ownership of U.S. radio stations is not allowed to exceed 25%, but a filing acquired by the Post details Soros is asking the commission to make an exception. Joining us now is FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr. Brendan, I spent 17 years in a great run in radio and loved every minute of it. But if George Soros gets his way, will they have the ability to basically silence conservative voices?
Look, this Soros-backed group is looking to buy the second largest radio station group in the country. We're talking over 200 radio stations across more than 40 markets. Some of them are in Pennsylvania, in Virginia, in Florida. The vast majority are probably, music or sports, but there are at least a handful in those states that carry conservative talk radio, including Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, Dana Lash. And so I think there is a concern. Look, Congressman Chip Roy was first to this to sound the alarm that the FCC has been asked not just to approve this, but to approve it on a special Soros shortcut where we're not even going to run the normal agency process of looking at this foreign ownership rule. And I agree with Congressman Chip Roy. The FCC should not be creating this special Soros shortcut. And look, some of these same voices that you just had on, they were silent when Democrats in Congress wrote to cable companies asking them to drop Fox News. They were silent when Democrat members of Congress asked the FCC to reject a conservative purchase of a Spanish language radio station in South Florida. So it's a bit ironic to hear them expressing these concerns now.
Well, according to the Washington Examiner, Americans still waiting on Biden broadband plan. Rural high-speed internet stuck in Dems red tape. Not a single home has been connected after 3 years. This was, they touted broadband. I don't know how many times I heard Biden talk about broadband. I know we're switching topics here, but what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, there was national headlines when it came out that the Biden administration got $7 billion to build nationwide set of EV charging stations, and they'd only completed 8. And what's news on top of that is that same Biden infrastructure package included $42.45 billion to bring internet service to millions of Americans. And as of today, they've connected 0 people from that 2021 initiative. And worse than that, the Biden administration officials are saying it will not be until next year, 2025 at the earliest, that even a single shovel's worth of dirt is going to be turned.
Unbelievable. No, Brendan, unbelievable. And that FCC story about Soros, that just shows you these independent agencies, there's got to be a big change in the way these things run, totally unaccountable. Brendan, thank you. Great to see you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here.
Tonight, breaking news as we come on the air, the disaster declaration just in, the first tropical storm of the season slamming the U.S. coast. Also in the east, the life-threatening heat about to get worse, and severe storms now possible in the northeast. And the urgent manhunt right now across multiple states for a suspect wanted for at least 4 murders. First tonight, the images coming in at the sour tropical storm Alberto, now taking aim at the Gulf. The watches and warnings up right now, communities already underwater tonight. Up to 10 inches of rain possible. Also tonight, this dangerous record-breaking heat where it gets worse by late week. And now this chance for severe weather in the northeast. Ginger Z standing by to track it all. Also tonight, this massive house explosion in Syracuse. 8 children among the victims rushed to the hospital. And tonight, what firefighters have now discovered The urgent manhunt at this hour across multiple states for a suspect wanted for at least 4 homicides. The latest case, a man and a woman found dead at a business, a vehicle stolen. Overseas tonight, Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un and their new pact. And closer to home tonight off the U.S. coast, about 100 miles from Florida, the U.S. Navy tracking a Russian submarine. Arthur Raditz with late reporting. Here in the U.S. tonight, the case making national headlines, the plastic surgeon arrested in the death of his own wife. Authorities say he was operating on her, now accused of delaying his call to 911 and waiting to perform CPR on her. Tonight, Justin Timberlake's lawyer now responding to Timberlake's DWI charge in the Hamptons. What he's saying, the applesauce scare, the FDA accusing Dollar Tree stores of failing to immediately pull recalled applesauce, possibly contaminated with lead. What we know tonight. This evening, the images here, one of the world's most famous landmarks, vandalized. What's been done to Stonehenge? Tributes pouring in tonight for Hall of Famer Willie Mays, known for his power and for his grace on the field. Also, this country marking Juneteenth tonight, the powerful images here, and the very delicate...
Tonight, inside the heat dome, record-breaking temperatures as millions struggle to stay cool.
It's overwhelming.
Taking precautions in the punishing weather.
It's hot. It's real hot. It's almost unbearable.
And when the forecast will become more forgiving. Grounded. Plans ruined as WestJet scraps dozens of flights ahead of a potential strike.
Very disappointed because we were hoping to get home.
Plus, putting the brakes on a disturbing message, a hate crime investigation on the streets of a Canadian city.
We've seen a 500% increase in both Islamophobic and anti-Semitic narratives.
And it's getting to a point where the consumer cannot take it anymore.
Also, the liquid gold rush, the reasons behind the rising price of olive oil, and the search for summer blockbusters.
I think that for many people it's more convenient to watch at home.
Struggling theaters hope that sold-out shows are coming soon. Hi, Peanut.
This is now Tropical Storm Alberto.
Tonight, the triple weather threat facing much of the country. Storms, wildfires, and dangerous heat. The Gulf Coast prepares for the first named storm of the season.
We hope for a miracle.
Plus, we get a first-hand look at the destruction of the deadly wildfires in New Mexico, still burning out of control.
We have certain areas of town where every home has been taken out.
And most of the United States bakes under a massive heat wave. We've got it all covered. The CBS Evening News starts now.
Day, France 24 covers all the ground in all 4 corners of the world.
Check out Around the World every afternoon here on France 24.
Welcome back to Night Watch here on France 24. A reminder of our top stories. Israeli tanks push further into Rafah in southern Gaza with at least 8 people killed at a tent camp. Meanwhile, more signs of a rift between Israel's military and government as the army spokesman says talk of destroying Hamas is throwing sand in the eyes of the public. Hundreds turn out for demonstrations in France after 2 boys are charged with the gang rape of a 12-year-old Jewish girl outside Paris. The girl said the assailants used anti-Semitic insults and death threats while they raped her. And after signing a defense agreement in North Korea, Vladimir Putin is now in Vietnam, a country whose neutral line on Russia's war in Ukraine has sparked criticism from its allies, the United States and the European Union. Good day or good evening, wherever you are. Thanks very much for joining us. First up, Israeli tanks have advanced deeper into Rafah in southern Gaza as the campaign to root out the last Hamas battalions continues. Heavy shelling and gunfire hit the tents of displaced families in the Al-Mawasi area with at least 8 people killed. according to witnesses and medics. 9 people were also killed in an Israeli strike as they waited for convoys of aid trucks to pass the Kerem Shalom crossing. Sophie Lamotte has this update.
In this hospital in Han Yunis, bodies are coming in faster than families can claim them. The morgue is reaching full capacity, but as the conflict drags on in Gaza, the number of casualties keeps on increasing. On Wednesday, more than a dozen people were killed in the south of the Gaza Strip. Some of them, thousands of families have been forced to seek shelter in badly damaged buildings in Han Yunis. The city, just north of Rafah, is estimated to be home to some 1.7 million people.
With still no sign of let-up to the fighting and ceasefire talks once again stalled, Israel's top army spokesman has said that Hamas cannot be defeated as an ideology, in another sign of the growing rift between military and political leadership. The comments prompted an immediate response from Benjamin Netanyahu's government, reaffirming its commitment to the total destruction of Hamas. Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said talk of destroying Hamas was like throwing sand in the eyes of the public.
Hamas is an ideology, is rooted in the hearts of the people of Gaza. To eliminate it, to replace those who run the public services, those who distribute food or steal it, there must be an alternative that can emerge. It's a decision that has to be taken politically, and the army will implement it. Until it is, Hamas will continue to exist. Hamas will not disappear from Gaza. It will not disappear.
Well, as fears of a wider conflict in the Middle East loom, the Israeli army has said that plans for an offensive in Lebanon have been validated. And a day after the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah said that no part of Israel would be spared should Israel launch an all-out war in Israel. Monty Francis has the latest.
This footage released by the Israeli army claims to show it striking a base operated by Hezbollah in Lebanon. The militant group says at least 3 of its fighters were killed in the attack, as footage from the ground showed smoke billowing into the air about 30 kilometers from the border. On the Israeli side of the border, air defenses shot down rockets launched by Hezbollah Wednesday in apparent retaliation for that strike. This as Israel's army issued a statement saying it was ready for a full-blown conflict with the militant group.
As part of the situational assessment, operational plans for an offensive in Lebanon were approved and validated, and decisions were taken on the continuation of increasing the readiness of troops.
At City Hall, hundreds gathered to condemn anti-Semitism after the rape of a Jewish girl in a suburb of the capital. Organised by group Together We Will Survive, demonstrators responded to Saturday's crime after 3 teenage boys were given preliminary charges of rape and of religiously motivated violence.
Whom were Hezbollah fighters, but dozens of civilians have also been killed.
News from France now. Protests have taken place in Paris and Lyon to denounce the gang rape of a 12-year-old Jewish girl on the outskirts of the capital. The girl told police she was approached by 3 boys at a park on Saturday before she was dragged into a shed, beaten and raped while the assailants made death threats and anti-Semitic comments. 2 13-year-old boys have been charged with gang rape. President Emmanuel Macron, along with political leaders from across the spectrum, denounced the scourge of anti-Semitism.
Gaza. Citing the events of October 7th, SOS Racism and other NGOs have called for a second demonstration on Thursday.
President Macron has asked his education minister to organise discussions in all schools on racism and anti-Semitism in France after the rape of the 12-year-old girl. Next, Vladimir Putin has touched down in Vietnam, a country which has tread a neutral line on Russia's war in Ukraine. This has sparked criticism from the likes of the United States and the European Union, with whom Hanoi has spent years building careful alliances. Putin's visit comes after he signed a mutual defense agreement with North Korea's Kim Jong-un, the Russian leader praising Pyongyang for its full support for the war in Ukraine. Tom Kennedy has more.
A spectacle.
Next to the United States, where at least 2 people have died due to wildfires over the past days in the state of New Mexico, where 7,000 people have been evacuated and around 1,400 buildings destroyed. The village of Ruidoso was particularly hard hit. The danger shifted on Wednesday as heavy rainfall and hail fell from the skies, with authorities now concerned over high winds and flash floods. Around 20 large fires are burning in other US states, including California to the west and Washington in the northwest. Finally, sports news, and hosts Germany have qualified for the knockout phase of the Euro 2024 with a 2-0 win over Hungary. In Wednesday's other match, Scotland drew 1-1 with Switzerland, keeping their hopes alive. Meanwhile, France have returned to training ahead of Friday's game against the Netherlands. All eyes are on captain Kylian Mbappe, whose participation is in doubt after he broke his nose in Les Bleus' victory over Austria. Selena Sykes is following the squad in Germany. She sent us this report.
A glimmer of hope for the French national to dethrone the Netherlands, who are currently at the top of Group D.
And that's where we leave it for now. Thanks very much for staying with us here on Night Watch. See you next time.
Or stream it on ABC iView.
Today, the opposition leader defends not releasing costings for his nuclear power proposal.
We want the information out there in bite-sized bits, if you like.
A 27-year-old killed in a suspected road rage incident in Sydney's west. Keith Karinawar found guilty of killing bottle shop employee Declan Laverty. And a report finds Coles and Woolies prices are similar, but there are savings at their German competitor. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Joanna Nicholson. Debate over Australia adopting nuclear power has erupted into claims of fantasy costs and phony consultations as the Prime Minister seeks to take the fight over energy policy to Peter Dutton. The Coalition's plan for reactors in 7 sites hasn't yet been publicly costed, and it isn't clear how much say regional communities will have in hosting them. Afternoon briefing host Greg Jennett reports from Parliament House.
Yes, it's a fairly important missing ingredient from yesterday, which, let's face it, will be critical to assessing the coalition plan. It's gradually firmed up a little, though, in the last 24 hours. So it started out as we will get the costings in due course, but it does appear to have landed at Papua New Guinea. There'll be much more besides.
All right, Greg Jennett in Canberra, thank you. Now, a manhunt is underway after a pedestrian was killed in a suspected road rage incident in Western Sydney. We're taking you now to Sydney, where police have been speaking following the incident.
5 a.m. today, emergency services were called to Jersey Road in Blackett after reports a pedestrian had been hit by a car. A 27-year-old man was treated by New South Wales ambulance paramedics. However, he died at the scene. Police have been told the man was hit by a vehicle before it fled the scene. Police established a crime scene and commenced investigation into the incident. We would like to speak to the driver of the ute with a metal tray, a black canopy, and a black toolbox with metal racks on top. We urge anyone who may know the driver or anyone with information or dashcam footage to please call police or Crime Stoppers on 1-800 333 000. Any questions?
That was great. I'm curious, how do police know this was a road rage incident?
Our initial investigations have led us to believe the deceased felt threatened by a car following him when we have information that the same car hit the victim.
How do you know who's the aggressor in this instance?
Our investigation is still going on at this stage for that one.
But how have you got an idea that he felt threatened?
Sorry?
How do you know that he felt threatened?
Well, this is from my initial investigations.
I understand police have seen some CCTV vision. What does it show?
At the moment, the footage is not very clear, so our investigation is still ongoing regarding the canvassing.
Is there any possibility that this driver isn't aware that this has happened? It seems like the driver would have known that he'd made contact with someone.
We are not so sure of this because the driver had taken off.
We haven't heard anything or located the driver at this stage?
No, not at this moment. Like I said, investigations are ongoing.
When I got the press release, it took me a minute to understand and break down what happened. Because on the one hand, it's a road rage incident. On the other hand, he was a pedestrian. What's your understanding in what happened?
Apparently, the victim had gotten out of the vehicle after being threatened by the car following him, and obviously words were said, and that's what led us to believe it could have happened because of a road rage incident.
Had you gone to the crime scene, sir?
Yes, I have.
Could you describe it?
It's devastating. I feel bad for the victim's parents, victim's family, and I appeal for the driver, please come forward and hand yourself into police because we will find you.
Had there been any history between the two?
Thank you. That's police speaking there in Sydney after a pedestrian was killed in a suspected road rage incident in Western Sydney. A manhunt for the person responsible is now underway, and police are saying there that they would like to speak to the driver of a white ute that was seen in the area at the time, and they were appealing for anyone who has information, saying that they should contact Crime Stoppers. To other news now. Keith Kirunua has been found guilty of murdering bottle shop employee Declan Laverty following an 8-day trial in the Northern Territory Supreme Court. The 20-year-old was charged with murder after Mr Laverty was found stabbed to death inside the Airport Tavern BWS in Darwin's northern suburbs in March last year. The jury was sent to deliberate on Wednesday afternoon and returned their unanimous verdict this morning. In the NT, murder carries a minimum non-parole period of 20 years. A man has been charged with murder and attempted murder after a shooting in South Mackay yesterday afternoon. Police allege Ryan Jeffrey Cole shot and killed a 34-year-old woman when she was sitting in her car. Another man was also shot when he allegedly tried to help. He remains in hospital in a stable condition. The 31-year-old gunman has been remanded in custody and will reappear in court at a later date. Detective Acting Superintendent Emma Novessel says it's a tragic incident.
This is a really unique situation, a really dynamic and
The man charged with killing police officer Jason Doig in South Australia's southeast has pleaded not guilty to murder and attempted murder. 26-year-old Jaden Harley Stimson from Senior near the SA Victoria border appeared in the Adelaide Magistrates Court via video link. Stimson pleaded not guilty to the attempted murder of Sergeant Michael Hutchinson and the shooting of Brevet Sergeant Doig in November last year. Speaking outside court, Stimson's lawyer said mental health competency tests were underway. The son of an elderly man allegedly assaulted by New South Wales police officers during an arrest in Sydney's southwest has spoken exclusively to the ABC, calling for more support for elderly dementia patients. Reporter Leah Harris has more.
So Ronald and Patricia Hodge are both in their 90s. They still lived at home together at their Picton home, and sadly Patricia suffered from quite advanced dementia. So in January this year, she suffered from some delusions at the time, and she called police,
A man accused of making a hoax bomb threat that forced multiple buildings in Melbourne's CBD into lockdown yesterday has faced court. Reporter Leanne Wong has more.
33-year-old Stephen Molden has been charged with multiple offences.
Forensic testing has confirmed bones found at a construction site on Sydney's northern beaches are not human. Officers were called. Further investigation will take place. A large commercial poultry farm in Sydney's Hawkesbury region is in lockdown after test results revealed the farm has been contaminated with bird flu. Reporter Tani Jash has more from Freeman's Reach.
Well, it's quite a large farm that has been impacted
due to a wide range of products at competitive prices, and all its pricing is available online. This report is the first one which was commissioned by the Albanese government earlier this year. We can expect to see similar reports every quarter for nearly the next 3 years, and it's a move which comes alongside an ACCC inquiry into supermarket prices.
Turning overseas now, and Vietnam is rolling out the red carpet for Russian President Vladimir Putin. His visit comes after a lavish trip to North Korea, where he signed a partnership agreement that could have ramifications for the West.
At your peril.
The militant group Hezbollah has threatened to attack the European nation of Cyprus if it helps Israel's war efforts. Middle East correspondent Eric Torchek reports.
The leader of Hezbollah
0.7 US cents, and that's finance.
Thanks, Alicia. You can keep up to date at news.abc.net.au and on ABC iView. Here are the top stories on ABC News. The Prime Minister.
It is 12 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 9:30 a.m. in New Delhi and 11 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Yasmin Yonkers at this hour. Russian President Vladimir Putin in Hanoi, the final stop of his two-nation tour of Asia. He's hoping to shore up crucial partnerships in the face of international isolation for his country's invasion of Ukraine. The US slams China's conduct in the latest South China Sea scuffle as dangerous and irresponsible. Manila reports a sailor suffered serious injury from what it described as intentional high-speed ramming. And those tensions also addressed in Malaysia, where China Premier Li Qiang is wrapping up his visit. The two countries agree that relevant ASEAN members should independently handle issues over the disputed South China Sea. The Russian President Vladimir Putin is in Vietnam for the second leg of his tour, aimed at asserting Moscow's influence in
Cyril Ramaphosa promises a new era for South Africa as he's sworn in for a second term, this time as head of a unity government. Cyril Ramaphosa sworn in for a second full term as South Africa's president.
So help me God.
His inauguration as head of a multi-party government comes just 3 weeks after elections in which his African National Congress failed to secure a majority.
The voters of South Africa did not give any single political party the full mandate to govern our country alone. They have directed us to work together to address their plight and realize their aspirations. They have also been unequivocal in expressing their disappointment and disapproval of our performance in some of the areas in which we have failed them.
Ramaphosa said the country had begun a new era and pledged that his government would work to improve basic living conditions for all citizens. He also affirmed his commitment to work with all political parties represented in the government of national unity.
We must reject every attempt to divide or distract us, to sow doubt and cynicism, or to turn us against one another. Those who seek to stand in our way, those who seek to inflame tensions in our country, will not succeed.
Ramaphosa's next task is to appoint a cabinet. This will likely involve complex negotiations with the various parties making up the coalition, some with very different philosophies.
The Russian President Vladimir Putin has arrived in Pyongyang, North Korea early Wednesday morning and was received by Kim Jong-un, leader of North Korea. Before the talks, Kim welcomed Putin in a lavish ceremony in the city's main square, where he introduced key members of the North Korean leadership, including Foreign Minister Choi Song-hui. Putin's visit to Pyongyang comes amid growing concerns about an arms arrangement in which North Korea provides Russia with badly needed munitions to fuel Moscow's war in Ukraine in exchange for economic assistance and technology transfers. North Korea is under heavy UN Security Council economic sanctions over its nuclear weapon and missile programs, while Russia is also grappling with sanctions by United States and its Western partners over its aggression in Ukraine.
As fighting in Sudan between the army and the Rapid Support Forces rages on, the United Nations says the world is in a race against time to avert a massive loss of life.
Without swift action, Sudan risks becoming engulfed in more ethnic violence and fragment even further. The risk of a conflict spillover remains high.
It says with famine impending, human rights violations on the rise and fighting escalating, the international community must work towards an immediate ceasefire in Sudan.
We are in the race against time to avert massive loss of life and in this unprecedented protection and food security crisis in Sudan.
Sudan's representative to the United Nations stressed his government's commitment to resolve the situation.
أن حكومة السودان ملتزمة بالقانون الدولي وقانون حقوق الإنسان.
We stress that the government of Sudan is committed to international humanitarian law, including during military operations. The armed forces are committed to the rules of engagement. The latter prioritizes the protection of civilians and the non-targeting of their properties or civilian infrastructure. Therefore, the armed forces has issued warnings through social media so that citizens leave any areas that are under the control of the rebels because they would be considered as legitimate targets. The UN is calling for the protection of civilians and infrastructure, unimpeded and expanded humanitarian access, and increased funding for aid. Amid scorching heat in Saudi Arabia, it's been reported that over 500 people have died during the annual Muslim pilgrimage to Mecca. State TV is reporting that temperatures rose to almost 52 degrees Celsius in the shade at the Grand Mosque in Islam's holiest city on Monday.
More than 2,760 pilgrims suffered from heat stroke due to intense heat. Tragically, 14 Jordanian pilgrims lost their lives during the first day of stoning. Medical teams and security forces were on site to provide immediate care and support for those affected by the heat. Most of Hajj rituals take place outdoor and require walking considerable distance between the sites. To manage the intense heat, Saudi authorities have implemented various safety measures, including cooling stations, medical tents, and hydration points.
But despite all the precautions, the death toll from the heat is expected to rise. On Wednesday, hundreds of people continued searching for missing relatives at Saudi hospitals. The Hajj is required of every able-bodied Muslim once in their life.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.